start to tip population and job epidemic we may have here in Cleveland. But first I want to throw out one quick disclaimer. I might be a complete moron and have no idea what I'm talking about. The opposite might be true. I might be a genius, but probably not. While it's likely that the concepts I'm going to talk about today are things you may have thought about yourself, I think they're pretty creative in nature. You look at PechaKucha, and you look at the previous three presenters, the people that are going to come later, Cleveland's an amazingly creative place. What I don't understand is why that creativity doesn't seem to find its way into some of the other realms within Cleveland. It seems to find its way only in the art community. So I am kind of thinking about, how do you start to take that energy into the civic realm? What does civic creativity mean? Look at how we approach some of the problems that we do have here in Cleveland, and imagine using the same creative energy that you use to produce a work of art or produce a drawing for a building to produce whether it's something as what I consider as boring as legislation or anything creative. And so I've just read probably 4 or 5 times now because I'm fascinated with the book. Really interesting when he talks about a bunch of different cities and how these cities take very, very small ideas and take things like the New York subway system where they dramatically decrease violent crimes by looking at very, very small things like graffiti. And so what I want to talk about today with Cleveland is population shifts and job loss. And a couple ideas that I think are pretty creative, but maybe you'll have a different opinion about them. And when you think about these things, you kind of have to get a little bit technical, and I'm kind of a dork, so I like getting into this stuff. And so you look at the population projection, not a very interesting slide, but you look at them, for the United States over the next 30 years, it's projected to increase by about 29% with population, but Ohio is only going at 1.7 in 30 years. You won't even believe it. There are only 3 states that are worse off than Ohio. 3 out of all 50. And so then you start to look at Cuyahoga County, and based on the projections that they're putting out for Cuyahoga County, you're looking at 30 years at a 36% population loss. And there's a lot of talk about maybe that's okay, maybe there's another strategy for developing Cleveland, and that may be true. But I kind of playing devil's advocate like to think, what if it's not? And so you look at the 3 different ways that you can retain population and grow. One is that the birth rate outpaces the death. The other is that you're able to attract your neighbors. Grass is always greener. And the other is to attract immigrant population. And that's the thing I'm particularly fascinated with because of a lot of the other statistics I'm going to show you here in a second. So you look at the statistics in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, the U.S., Midwest sector, and the entire U.S., and we're not doing too well attracting our neighbors, as you can tell in the top 2. But attracting abroad international, we're not doing great, but we're at least in the positive. So I started thinking, at 2,600, we're at about 21% of Ohio that we attract. So what if we were to try doing some things so that maybe we could attract that same 21% of the entire Midwest sector, which would put us at about 37,000 people a year. And that's a pretty substantial difference to what we're looking at with 36% decline. And so you look at these 3 things, and now looking at those charts, you know that we probably don't want a whole lot more babies per family. Maybe we do. I don't think that's a good idea. Attracting our neighbors is something we apparently aren't very good at. But our entire history is based on attracting immigrant populations. The entire city was based on that principle. And so what if my idea is what if we did something as simple as a web page adjustment? What if we went to the Cleveland web page and found a way to put it in 20 different languages? You take the 20 cultures that are immigrated to the U.S. the most and put it in those languages. I've talked about this with a number of people, and some people have similar ideas, but what might it do for the city if you go online and let's say you're coming from Spain. It used to be that if you were immigrating to the U.S., you would go online that's what you do now, apparently, but it used to be that one family member would travel to the U.S., and then they'd raise enough money to bring the rest of their family, and then they'd raise enough to bring the extended family, and then the neighbors would come. What if they're on their internet looking, and they were able to go to Cleveland.com and find out that we are the most acceptable city in the United States, or at least the Midwest, for our 21%. This is the second thing I wanted to talk about. 20 seconds is not as long as everyone else says it is. 268,000 people this year alone looking at job loss, bringing it to a total of 646,000. So, and then you start looking at the gross gross domestic product charts, which again are very boring to a lot of people, but I think it's pretty cool. Ohio is only slightly worse than Nevada and Arizona, who are number 1 and number 2 in population growth. So there's something about that I find interesting, because how is it that what is Ohio missing? Is it that we don't have enough sand? I mean, honest to God. So I said, what if people were coming here and we have this job loss problem? What if you walked around Cleveland and instead of seeing the sign on the right for lease, you saw the sign on the left for free? What if we started taking some of these empty buildings? That's a great segue. I paid them to do that. What if we started giving away space in these empty buildings? And I understand to a building owner that's not probably particularly attractive. So what if we only gave away 20%? Let's say you have 5 storefronts. You give one of them away to a business entrepreneur that's going to start something in Cleveland. Because at the end of the day, if they fail, who really cares? They spend 10 grand getting out of space. It's not that big of a deal. But you can imagine what that could do for some of these streets, some of these building owners who right now have no one in their building. And so you look at, okay, profit, if profit equals 0, rent equals 0. That's my idea. The idea is that, yes, you don't want people just staying for free forever, but what if you establish a rent escalation kind of situation where if the company started making money, they would pay money? And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's not a genius idea, but I don't know that's ever been tried. And then my ultimate kind of idea, and these are pretty small ideas, I think, what if you combine the two? What if someone from Spain went online, found that Cleveland was the most acceptable place in the United States, and they would give you a space to start a business? What if those were the first things they saw instead of the headlines of Cleveland.com talking about the horrible things that happen in the city? So those are my ideas. The most important thing I want you to take from this is that the ideas aren't necessarily the most important thing. It's just that small ideas can really make big differences. Everything doesn't have to be a $500 million project. I think they're great, but I think we need to think more creatively, just the way everyone here does with their art.